everyone well enough to know that
Oh,
people
now
briefly
we're
did get
recording.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay, now I see that. You are such a pain. Oh, what do we? Yeah, well, that was kind of pragmatic. So, Professor of Pragmatism. All right, so we are here and we are kicking off in three, two, one. Hi, I am Nancy Henson, and I am here with a my cast of characters. I think they're my LabVIEW conspirators. They're a cast of characters today because that's just who they are today. We have, as usual, our Mr. Steve Watts, the Professor of Pragmatism, who tends to hit the record button a little bit early. And of course, we always have Sam, who is the architect of adventure. Sam, you learn so much stuff, read so many books, have so many ideas, it makes my head spin. I am our chief of communication. I can't remember what my name is here. I'd have to go back and look at my notes.
Oh,
What am I again? Connected, chief of
connected.
connected communication. And we welcome Stefan Lemmens to our group today. Stefan, we are still trying to figure out exactly what your name is, and it might be shortcut Stefan because of the presentation that you gave quite some time ago. Steve's going to put a link to that so everybody can go watch your presentation again, and it can live on and on and on. So this is TMiLV. Is that how we pronounce it? This month in LabVIEW. We talk about what's going on, the events, the latest news. Maybe you get a little bit of goofy here and there. And we are the LabVIEW conspirators. And as you notice, we like to have a guest every month with our monthly LabVIEW broadcast because it is this month in LabVIEW. So if you want to join the show, please do. If you have things you want to cover, in particular, if you've seen an application that is really cool or you've done one that's really cool, please let either myself or Steve or somebody know so we can make sure that we talk about the coolness that you are doing. I've got a couple quick things on news from NI, but I'm gonna start off on just kind of this little news round in our A block. Professor Watts, anything that you noticed in the news that you weren't going to say anything about, but maybe you do want to mention real quickly?
I wasn't going to say anything about it, but NI have been in the news because they've been took to court by shareholders. So that case is going. The can be found on Carsten's NI history, where he's got links to the judge's judgment, which she's dismissed a few of the charges, and there's a few charges still left to go, about a specific period in time when the uh, what's
Yeah,
is
it
it
looks
the
like it's
plaintiffs, isn't it? There's a plaintiffs, is that the word? The people
yeah,
suing
plaintiffs.
NI.
Yeah, and
It's
it
where
looks
it's
like
where
it's not like serious like insider trading. It was just there were trades made and people could have made more
that was it.
money.
Yeah, and it was a specific period of time,
Yeah,
August and September, where they were
related to
buying
the merger.
shares where they
Yeah,
knew they were going to get took over. And
yeah.
there's a big argument about whether that happened with knowledge and things like that. So that's where it's at.
But
Uh,
that doesn't really have anything to do with LabVIEW, but our friends in the LabVIEW world have noticed it. So go to Karsten's LinkedIn spot and find
yeah,
more information
it
there.
was interesting.
Sam, we're not talking about WordPress today, and I specifically said we were not even going to mention the word WordPress in our podcast. But do you want to just take like 30 seconds to summarize that controversy that's going on outside of our LabVIEW community? Just 30 seconds, and then people can get in touch with you, and maybe we dive into what's actually going on there. Not from the perspective of that community, but our community. So I just want to give you 30 seconds to mention it because you're passionate
Yeah.
about it.
Basically, it's a soap opera. If you wanted the soap opera stuff, there is a Reddit I think called WP Drama, and you can Google it on Twitter, and it's all over the place. Basically, the argument stems around open source trademarks, how much you should give back or shouldn't. This guy, owner of WordPress, got upset that this company had made billions of dollars hosting stuff. He's also a billionaire, so like, don't feel too sorry for him. He's not some poor open source maintainer. And then he went full on nuclear, and apparently he owns the package repository for this thing, which is kind of like, our VIPM is owned by, a person or a company, not necessarily the community. And so this guy decided to cut off access to this company to the package repository and stole some of their packages, and it caused all kinds of problems and headaches. And he's done a bunch of other crazy stuff. Uh, I don't know. I think it's like billionaire derangement syndrome when you get so much
There you
money that
go.
you don't know what to do, and you surround yourself with sycophants and people who tell you you're great and wonderful, and then you do crazy stuff. I don't know, but
Yeah.
like you can draw your own
Well,
conclusions.
we're all human, definitely. But yeah, there's craziness going on in the world there, and I think that, and as we talked about that in the green room, that'd be a good conversation to kind of dive into. And I love our community. We know each other pretty well. I don't know if there's any billionaires in our community, but nobody acts like that yet or at all. So I feel pretty good about that. Speaking of open source, before I mention something, news from an eye on open source, Stefan, did you have anything that you wanted to, just off the cuff, top of your head, news
About open source.
or anything, any news? I'm kind of going random
Ah,
here.
You are going random.
Yes,
Random.
random rambling.
Um, no, but I know that on the open source side, Active Framework is on its way. So
Yes,
I'm
excellent.
part of the AF Guild as well, and yeah,
That's
I've
great to
heard that
hear.
it's on its way. So, yeah.
Excellent. Eli mentioned that, and he also mentioned that they're getting some more contributors on the icon editor, and they've made some changes so it's easier to switch to the dev branch. And so they're making some good changes there. Looks like they'll be ready for AF. I will one day fully on board to AF, and Stefan, you'll hear from me when I do decide to go do that in a year or 10.
In
Let's see, news.
in
Yes.
Eli's presentation at GDevCon, he put up a very good slide which showed the process that NI were applying to open sourcing things and where things were in the process. And I really like that. I think that shows a great deal of thought is going into it, which is cool because it's not just opening up libraries for people. It's how
Right.
do we control it and contribute. So I,
Right.
I was I was quite pleased with that.
That's excellent. I missed some of those details. I had early conversations when I was still at NI, and it's a challenge because NI has their process and their way of doing things, which we've learned a little bit about here as well. But and then doing that and then open sourcing things in a way where it's not complete chaos is definitely new, I think, to a lot of people in our community. So another quick thing, Eli's sending this teaser out as well that they're exploring a different kind of model around academic. So that has been something we have legitimately complained about ad nauseum in I's move away from academic. And we're going to talk a little bit more about CTI at some point in time here too. Actually, I think that's my next note. So I should read my notes before I actually moderate a show. Wouldn't that be a good idea? So I don't know what this new model is going to be exactly. So Eli's sending the teaser out. Go reach out to Eli or Norm if you want to be involved with academic. Norm did an awesome CTI video not too long ago. Norm's going to drop another video with regards to CTI and doing servo control. So I think there's a lot of momentum building around CTI. I'll mention one other thing on CTI. We're trying to figure out what is going to be our best model for various parts of the repository. And, we have someone who's really driving, like Tim Robinson, who's been on the show before. He's really driving the driver development. And Fabiola is really in charge of the translations into Spanish and to English. And are we doing Chinese? I can't remember yet. I'm real passionate about making sure we have just a
And French.
solid French. Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Duh,
Got four
Ollie.
languages now.
Yes, all the languages that Fabiola speaks, which is a lot, which is why
I think Olivia's on board for. I might be dumping on
yeah,
Olivia. I think he's on board for
yeah,
the
I'm
French
glad
stuff.
he's on board. But I used to teach. I'm going to go off on a side tangent here, Rabbit. Since I'm the moderator, I do get to take an occasional rabbit trail. I used to love teaching LabVIEW in Montreal, and I taught it at the Averna office. I got booted though because Fabiola came in because she speaks French, or at least better French than I speak. So Fabiola took over teaching those classes. I didn't get booted, but
I was taught. This might please Fabiola. I was talking to my kids about Fabiola, and they said, "Oh, is she like as good a programmer as you and all that?" Oh, well, yeah. I think we're about the same as that. I said the thing you have to bear in mind: she's as good as me in one language, or I'm as good in one language, and she can do four languages. She can do that in four languages. So essentially, she's four times better than me.
There you go. What's your fourth language? Spanish, French, English?
Well, you mentioned Chinese. I don't know. I didn't know that you
I don't know.
spoke.
No, she doesn't
I
do
don't think
Chinese.
she does.
I'm sure she had four
Maybe
languages.
Italian? That's like French, Spanish,
We'll
like
have
in a
to,
way.
somebody can text her
Maybe I
and
might be
add
overselling
me
her.
in. Yeah, but
I knew she
perfect.
spoke French and Spanish for sure.
So this became this month in Labby became the Fab show. So maybe the fabulous Fab, who's not so modest, that's what she says.
She can come on now
She's
because
very
she's
modest.
free.
Maybe she'll join our show. So continuing on and getting off this rabbit trail. Okay, we've covered the news. So exciting stuff on CTI, exciting stuff on academic. Active Framework open source going live soon. Stefan is the master of AF, at least with her. Well, Sam, you done some AF. All right. That's our
I
that's
was
our
going to
big
add
news.
one little caveat. If
One little
anybody doesn't
caveat.
know who Fab is, because apparently not everybody does. I did an
Oh,
interview with her recently on the podcast, so
Good.
okay.
just we could throw a link in there.
Yeah, throw a link.
Yeah.
Throw a link.
I
Fabiola
was
has been.
quite surprised, but yeah, she's been away for 3 years, and so anybody who came in those 3 years may not have heard of her or know who she is.
That's
And
right.
there may be some people who've been around who don't know either, but yeah, she's pretty prolific, so it's kind of hard to miss her.
The fabulous Fab.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Now we're moving on to shortcut Stefan. The advent of code. Stefan, talk about the history of the advent of code. What is it looking like this year, and how can this be a good vehicle for either people training their teams, people onboarding to LabVIEW, all those fun things? Take it away, Stefan.
Well, about the advent of code, first of all, I didn't create it. I just adapted it into the LabVIEW world. Um, but I think it exists since 2015 when a guy named Eric Wassel was going to do some puzzles for his friends in November, and he said, "Well, let's do a Christmas themed puzzle beginning of December, so in the Advent period." And he expected to get 50 friends on board on his website, and by the 1st of December, there were already 4,000 people subscribed because his friends had friends, and they had friends, and they had friends, and they had also friends. So it exploded very fast, and he had some server problems apparently. And I guess 7 years later, in 2022, he had 1 million subscribers. So it's a set of puzzles, challenges that you can solve in any programming language. Some of them you can even do with pen and paper. So if you like puzzling, it's really worth looking at it. And there is a global scoreboard. So the first one that solves a puzzle every day gets 100 points, and number 99 or number 100 gets 1 point. But competing on global scoreboard is very hard because there are programming teams all over the world. They solve those things faster than I can read the puzzle. But it's worth mentioning Darren once got on the scoreboard. Darren Nettinger.
Very good.
Yeah. So to be fair for everybody, it starts at same. I think Sam might know the time better in US time, but here it's 6 a.m. in the morning. They release a puzzle.
It's like 10 o'clock at night, so if you want to stay up late, if you're a night owl, it works for you. Otherwise, yeah.
Awesome. That's what I need. Just something else to keep me up late.
What's the link to this? Can you stick it?
I think it's just adventofcode.com. I do have some
Yeah.
comments if you're done, Stefan. Don't want to cut you
Oh
off.
yeah. So you have to
Oh, yeah, got it.
create a login there, and then you can see puzzles. So in December, from the 1st until the 25th of December, every day at the same time, a puzzle releases. and then you have to solve part one. And if that's solved, part two will be released, and you can solve the same problem, but a little bit more difficult or with a twist, or it might be like you have to do a lot of calculations and then like 1 million times, and then suddenly it doesn't need to be a million but a trillion, and you get into memory issues or stuff like that. And I started with it in 2019, solving it, did some tries. But I also noticed on the NI forum that other LabVIEW developers were solving those puzzles. And some of them asked, like, can we do something together? And I noticed that I can open up my scoreboard to other people. And then we can compete on our private LabVIEW scoreboard. So the first LabVIEW developer gets 100 points, which is a bit easier than the first one globally. And the first year I had like 30 participants. Now we're about 50 or 60 every year. But scoreboard can hold up to 200. So everybody who wants to use LabVIEW to solve them is welcome.
So
and yeah,
is it the GitHub site? Where is the main place for us to go?
I think it's just Advent of Code or maybe AOC.com,
Yeah.
but it's Advent of Code. If you
It's
just Google Advent of Code,
adventofcode.com,
Yeah.
2024.
Right. But what about the LabVIEW community piece of
yeah,
it?
the thing I was
the
coming to
Discord.
is that Casey May recommended me to start a Discord server for that. So we
Okay.
have our own Discord server with a channel for each puzzle to discuss the problem statement or discuss the answer, not to spoil them when discussing the problem. And there's a page on the LabVIEW wiki where I think Olivier has summarized all the LabVIEW discords, and Advent of Code's also there. So you can go
great.
there and then get on my Discord. And there is also the explanation on how to log into Advent of Code website. You all get the same question, but you don't get the same input data. So we can't copy each other's answers, because if Sam solves a puzzle with his input data, he gets a different answer than I do. The answer is usually a number, sometimes a string.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So we can collaborate, but like you said, when I sign up, I am getting input data that's different from everybody else's.
Yeah, like you have to do calculations, or usually the story is always you have to help the elves, Santa's elves, to get the presents ready for Christmas. And sometimes your elves are hungry and they have backpacks with food, and you have to sum up all the calories in some backpacks or whatever. But the nice thing is there's also always a very small example. Like you have 5 elves with some backpacks with a few things in there, and it's easy. It's very well explained. And then you get your input, and you suddenly have like a couple of 100,000 of elves with a lot of stuff in there. So you have to program it, because otherwise it will take a lot of time to do it manually. But this is perfect to do TDD, test-driven development, because
I like that.
You can do the small test the example. I've noticed that it doesn't always hit the edge cases, but it's there, and then you can start working on your solution.
I was going to say, one of the things I love about that, and Sam, with your thumbs up, because Sam, you're pretty passionate about, as soon as anybody starts learning any bit of LabVIEW code, they need to start doing good software engineering practices. I know Eli's really passionate about that too. So this is a great opportunity, like you said, for people to learn about test-driven development, and hopefully we'll have that conversation in the Discord. That's awesome. I really want to do this, but I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be getting a job by the end of November or December, but I want to do this. So
Yeah.
I may
Well,
have to have a conversation with Mr. H about my free time, but I am definitely joining this year.
the way it works is on the 1st of December, the puzzle is pretty easy, and I'm sure you
Mhm.
could solve it in 5 to 10 minutes. But they
Get much
become
harder.
harder and harder, and they're also pretty well balanced. The hardest ones are always in the weekends. Um,
Okay.
yeah, Eric Wassel has a good. I'll send a link later, but he has a good behind the scenes of Advent of Code video
Oh,
where he
good.
explains how it um, began and how he balances everything out. Yeah, the hardest one is usually the weekend before Christmas. Then there's uh, I already spent like a day on one, and well, I always say I'm not responsible for the time it takes you to solve the puzzles, nor for the discontentment at home because I've been there.
I was gonna say, yeah, don't get
I
divorced.
guess we're not having a Christmas tree this year, and I may be solving the elves and everybody else's presents, and my kids are going to miss
Yeah.
out. So
I will
basically,
just say my wife hates it. So I'm only I'm on a very strict time limit. I'm allowed like 1 hour
But
per month, and that's
yeah,
it.
the thing is, first week it's okay because yeah, it's fine. And then when it takes up more time, yeah. But the kids love it. Did you solve the puzzle today? Did you find the answer? So yeah, they are really real supporters.
yeah,
Um,
I guess I better make a full month of dinners so that my family gets fed and have all that frozen before this thing starts. Otherwise, it won't be fed in December. So,
and another thing is you have to enter a number usually, but you can't just guess because if each wrong guess will lock you out for an amount of time. So the first guess
oh.
will lock you out for like a minute before you can take a next guess, but after 5 wrong guesses, you're probably out for half an hour or something like that.
So basically, when I write my code, that code is going to generate the answer,
Yeah,
and then I go plug that answer in. And if I'm plugging in the wrong answer because my code was wrong, then
yeah,
eventually I get locked out, pissed off, and go for a run, right?
yeah. And then you
Got it.
can do another try. Yeah, like that.
Got it.
Um,
Interesting.
That's where
So
the
someone
tests
could
are
do this
helpful.
hand calculated, like you said at the very beginning.
Yeah,
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
awesome.
but
Outstanding. So what about the other competitors? What other languages are like the most prevalent languages that you find on here, or do we even know what people are programming in?
Yeah, I also, because the way I got to know this is on a tech podcast in Belgium. Uh, and there's also a group in the Netherlands that have a scoreboard with people using a lot of languages. Nowadays, most of them use Python, but there are very strange languages as well. And I know somebody did it on an FPGA.
yep.
Nice.
So
People
yeah,
have done it in like SQL and Bash of all things.
yeah,
Like
Oh,
if you,
wow.
it's
or in
like
Excel.
crazy in
Oh,
Excel.
no,
Yeah,
that's dumb. Anybody who's doing it in Excel, they should just be
yeah.
locked out, period, and never allowed to come back.
Um, but there are a lot you can do it in any language because it's just solving a problem. You are some of them get really hard because you have to get into a bit of math or formulas or finding the shortest distance from point A to point B on a map is somewhere in every year.
Uh,
Um,
so you're probably good at that. Shortcut Stefan, you're that's the one you're
uh,
really good at, right?
well, no, that's always a hard one, but some of them are just finding the right math formula. Uh, but it's fun when you solve a problem. And what the benefit of LabVIEW is because there are always each year some things that you have to visualize something like doing a real puzzle. You get arrays with these squares, and then you have to map the correct sides next to each other, take away the grid, and then you see something. And in LabVIEW, if you do it in an intensity graph or even in a Boolean array, you suddenly can read letters or whatever, characters, and then you can just enter your solution. Because other people, if they do it on a command line, it might be a bit harder to
You could
visualize
probably
it.
use a bit of hardware and output it to like an LED array if you really
Yeah,
want.
yeah, it is.
That would be
And
kind
I like the idea. I'm going to interject real quick. I like the idea of those of us that are in the LabVIEW world. Generally, we're talking to hardware, whether it's test or measurement, it's in a lab, whether it's, launching, super heavies and starships. We're talking to hardware, and this gives us an opportunity to do something outside, maybe outside our comfort zone, and get our brains to think a little bit differently. So I really felt like when I learned SQL and did a database app, that actually processed $9,000 worth of transactions for a silent auction, actually 90,000. I was able to come back and I was a better LabVIEW programmer because of it. And back in the day when we did it was the Indivo object-oriented course back before, and I had native classes. We would do a do a OO design, so a UML class diagram of a hockey game. And you have your hockey players and their sticks and the rink and everything else. And it was great to go do that and then come back and look at our test and measurement application and be able to draw some analogies and think differently. So I love the concept of this to expand our thinking. And sorry, Stefan, because I kind of interrupted you right there, which I sometimes do. So keep going. And I do want to hear from both you and Sam on kind of on that topic. Was there something that helped you, something you learned from advent of code that you've applied somewhere?
The thing I've learned most is that there are many different solutions to the same problem, especially on the Discord, because everybody is kind enough to show his solution or her solution, and everybody solves it in a different way. Some people use arrays, some use sets and maps. I learned a lot about regular expressions while I parse strings in a different way. You learn a lot from seeing, you understand the problem because you solved it, but seeing how other people solve it makes you think differently on, hey, oh, that function also takes in arrays. Now I can use that in my next project and be a bit more efficient. Instead of a lot of loops, you use that function. Yeah, you learn a lot. Also, every year, the things I don't often use in my job are things like regular expressions, the real regex things. Recursion is not going to happen that often, but there are every year puzzles that need recursion. You always need to keep in mind memory management. As I said in the beginning, probably the second part might challenge you about that. So yeah, and just talking to others, you find a lot of hidden gems. And usually Darren is there for 10 days to 2 weeks, and I learned a lot of small functions from him.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed that Laura lets him out to go do that. They have quite a few children at home, and I can imagine their December is crazy. So thankful to have Darren there. Sam, got something to interject there on stuff that you've learned?
Yeah, I've got a list of things I've learned. Stefan hit on some of them. So first of all, TDD is like huge in that because it prevents you from wasting your time making bad guesses usually, right? Like if your algorithm's way off, the test isn't going to pass, and they give you really simple examples. So I highly encourage that. Stefan mentioned recursion and regex. Those are also things that I don't necessarily use all the time, although regex is like a superpower if you can figure it out. Sets and maps are also something I use a lot for that are newer in LabVIEW and people don't use. Graph traversing algorithms are also something they do a lot of. But the one thing I noticed, and Stefan, you can comment on this, but so it's great for learning to deal with changing requirements because you do the first part and then the requirements change. But I think it enforces the Yagni thing of like you're not going to need it because trying to predict which way it changes, I have a very low percentage. Sometimes I predict right, like, hey, it's going to change in this direction. It's kind of obvious. But a lot of times it expands in ways that I didn't think about. And so that whole idea of like not over designing things and not premature optimizing and just solving the problem at hand, I think is really useful. So I don't know, maybe you have better luck at predicting which way it's going to expand than I do, but I don't.
No,
It's
you
amazing
always
the ways in
try.
which it can expand. So sorry.
Yeah, you always try to foresee something, but yeah, it doesn't always work out the way you think. And
So how many people drop off? Like so
well,
Darren joins
I can have a look. Like last year,
because
For
I can
me personally, if I
imagine.
make it to like number 15, I'm pretty happy. And then I
Okay.
usually like think I'll get back to it later in the year and never do. Because like it just things get busy around the holidays and things get
let's
harder.
say last year the first part of the first puzzle was globally in any programming language solved by about 330,000 people.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
the the last part of puzzle 25, and you only get that part when you solved all previous ones, solved by 11,800.
Wow. That's impressive too. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
It's quite a
So,
good progression. It's you've really applied yourself to get to the 11,000 point, which is quite cool, really.
Because if you think about it, you said it was 330,000
thousands.
students.
Yeah.
So you assume that about a third of those drop off because they just don't have time. So you probably seriously have about
About 3%.
110, and then so you end up having there's a really good shot about 10% of the people who are really into at least 10% of the people are able to make it to the finish line, or the people who can really commit the time, as opposed to the people that then have to go do all their holiday stuff and wrap presents and fun stuff like that. So
But
that's impressive.
you don't have to solve it within 24 hours. Usually,
Oh.
like last year, you can still solve the one from 2015.
Uh-huh.
Um, Last year, I did like the first 18 or 19, and then I didn't have time to do the other ones, and they were pretty hard. So I did them in January. I
Oh,
finished the
good.
rest
Okay.
because uh, uh, let me have a look on my leaderboard. It was so Craig Walker from the UK was actually the first one to finish them all, but I had a little bit more speed in the beginning, which gave me more points in the beginning, and then in January I still catched up with him, uh, which made me the leader of my own leaderboard. It's a bit silly, but yeah,
That's
As it
but
should be.
Darren, Q, they're usually joining.
Casey's
Der,
also
Der,
the top of there.
Casey, Derek Bomarito. Yeah.
See, this is the problem with this though, is that is like really intimidating to be like
But
competing with that group. But if somebody's
if
learning LabVIEW and they want to learn
if
from the best
yeah,
and work with the best, this is a place to go do it.
if you wanna really compete with them, it might be because then in a couple of days you're like, well, I can't compete with that. But then on the other side, take a look at the Discord and learn from them. 'Cause
I tell you
Yeah,
what would
they're
be,
pretty good about sharing their solutions. So it is a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
oh,
so
that's great.
so
Yeah.
you
that's
your
really
solution, and
nice.
you look at it and you're like, wow, okay, this is kind of, and you might think you did a good job, and then you look at theirs and you're like, oh, they use like 3 nodes and I use like 50. Like, oh, I was doing it the hard way or something.
Or
So
like, I
It's,
have a
these will take,
solution and I know it works, but it might take like 10 minutes to compute everything. And then suddenly Derek or Darren, they have a solution which finishes in 5 seconds or something like that. So yeah,
but you don't
then
really
you
have
win.
to admit that, like, if my solution takes an hour, the only thing that matters from the advent of code perspective is I got the answer, even if my code was really
Yeah,
crappy and it took an hour.
yeah.
Um, So maybe I do need to learn AF sooner rather than later.
I don't
I'm
know if
not,
AF helps for this particular,
Nope.
because usually it's not doing a bunch of stuff in parallel. It's
This
usually
is
like
this is
one
all
thing.
primitives.
Yeah.
yeah,
More
I'm
it's
primitive.
sure there are
Okay.
some that could benefit from that, where you might launch a parallel process to do some stuff, but yeah, generally no.
no, you don't have to do very complex frameworks or architecture. Most people's code is sequential and not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
always
A
well
lot of
written
the
code.
problems can be done in one VI. Some of them benefit. There was one year they did a sequential thing. I think you might have done it, Stefan, where they built like a compiler over several things. Or was
Yeah,
that
that was the first one
that
I
and that
started in
particular
2000.
one, writing reusable code was actually useful because you could take blocks that you'd written for previous things and pull them in.
Implement.
And
Interesting.
and it was like, you had like 10 different commands and you had to parse each one correctly. So there, like some object-oriented programming and inheritance made sense. But for a lot of them, like sometimes I use classes just because it's like that's the way I think. But like a lot of them you can do in one VI with just primitives.
That
I'd say
sounds
probably
awesome.
like half the problems you can do in one VI with primitives.
So I'm
Fairly
going
easy.
to kind of slide us in to our next block around events, but
Uh,
we can keep
can I add?
interjecting this as we go
Oh,
because
Nancy, can I
yeah,
add one more thing
yeah,
about the Advent of code?
definitely.
Because some general stuff, but it's a lot of times, not in the LabVIEW world, but in a lot of other programming languages, it's used for doing interview preparations, job interviews, trainings on companies,
Yep.
teaching mob programming.
Yeah.
I've seen universities do coursework or exams, just practicing problems. Or yeah, I've seen a photo on a university where the solution was printed and put on the wall for everybody. So
That's
eh,
cool.
you can do a lot of stuff with it. Even if you don't want to compete, you can use those puzzles to do a job interview or train yourself in a language.
You bring up a really good point. So I'm going to connect this. I am going to connect it back to events here. So one of the things I was thinking is this could be um, great for user groups. Like if there's some problems that are doable in a short period of time, maybe we start at some of the user group meetings. If somebody can't come up with content or something, you guys use this as part of the meeting. Or okay, alarm down in Colorado, Sam, I post my solution, which I guarantee you is going to be the crappier one, and then Sam posts his that's 10 times better than mine. We have a great conversation about that at a user group.
Or even try and solve it together.
Yeah,
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 so yeah, my mind immediately jumped to doing a mob programming session, but I also like yours of
that
like
too.
you put
Yeah,
it out a week or two ahead of time, be like, hey, everybody take an hour, set a timer, see where you get on this. If you finish it, awesome. If you don't, that's fine too. And then we'll compare solutions. That could be interesting too, because you could learn a lot from like how did other people approach this problem?
exactly. And it's interesting, speaking of user groups, the goal that NI has is by the end of 2025, so within a year, to have over 80 active LiveView user groups. So I think Advent of Code definitely can help drive some enthusiasm and excitement around it, especially what I'm learning about it. And I'm embarrassed that I haven't done it yet, but it's something that's accessible to anyone, even if they're onboarding to LabVIEW. It's not like you have to understand some complicated, and maybe later they get more complicated, but most people, this should be accessible when they're learning LabVIEW, right?
Yeah.
The first
yeah,
couple problems for sure are not super computer sciencey and don't require a lot of programming knowledge. The more advanced ones, yes. But as Stefan said, you can go back through previous years. So you can pick the first three or four problems of like the past 5 years, and right there's a whole bunch of problems that you could do.
Some of
Okay,
these
that sounds
computer science problems and solutions, these structures. This is why I was quite pleased when Sats and Maps came into LabVIEW, is that they're actual computer science structures into the language. And a lot of those algorithms are worth knowing because I remember years and years and years ago we ran into issues with 2D arrays in LabVIEW, and because I understood some of these structures, I could make a sort of hash table array using single arrays and work my way out of it. But that whole project ground to a halt because everything was going slow because LabVIEW couldn't handle 2D arrays at that time. That shows you how old it was. It was Windows NT, but You know, it's
You are
it's
old.
it's it's well worth understanding some of these lower level algorithms, which you are shielded from a lot of the time in LabVIEW because you know it's the primitives do a lot of the work for you. But actually, it's worth knowing how to do things and manipulate data.
So,
Um,
Steve, when are you going to come out with a book on some of those lower level algorithms that you've had to work through over the years and bring that into maybe it's not a book, maybe it's just GitHub somewhere, uh, having access to your experience there for students that are onboarding to LiveView that may be familiar with these, typical, like you said, software engineering algorithms and then doing them in LabVIEW. What's the best place for them to go? Are you going to create that in your copious free time right now, since you
oh
don't have
yes,
anything
yes.
else going on like
I'll be
CTI?
on it. I'll be on it right away.
That's what I figured.
I did
Oh,
post a blog article, which is the first one I've done for a donkey's years. So blog article was posted. So,
Outstanding.
I
oh,
know.
but by the way, the last 2 years, the puzzles have changed a bit because Eric Wassel is trying to prevent people from using AI, using
Yeah.
just
That was going to be my next
ChatGPT.
topic. Sam, you have
Oh,
something.
I was just gonna say to your thing about like computer science stuff and bringing it into LabVIEW. A while ago, Tom McQuillan and I started taking the OOP design patterns book and implementing them in LabVIEW, and we have a repository out there somewhere.
Oh,
I can
well, where? You said somewhere. Like,
it's in GitHub or GitLab. I will throw a link somewhere, but it's out there. It's not
it's
finished. But
awesome.
if anybody is into that and wants to contribute, you can go do. We did the most common patterns that we use, and we got like I don't know. I think there's 20, and we did maybe 10 or a dozen.
I mean,
There are some other ones that
I'm
needed.
talking much lower level than that. I'm talking linked lists and things like that. You know,
Yeah, yeah. No,
structures that hard drives are made of and things like that. But
what you're
it's
talking about is
valuable anyway.
actually probably more useful. Like a deep understanding of how to use sets and maps to create graphs and things like that
Yes.
and traverse them and those type of things is actually really useful. And it's one of those things where because we're not computer scientists, we don't see that. But once you learn those things, then you see those everywhere in the problems that you solve. And you're like, oh, this would make this a lot easier. And we end up like inventing those things like,
Oh yeah. Well,
really,
going back to what Nancy said about databases, learn databases. You don't, you know, don't learn quite so much LabVIEW and spend a bit of time learning databases, and you'll be a much better programmer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of room for like inefficiencies and stuff there too. And there's like in other languages they have these object ORMs, objects relational models or something where like you don't have to write SQL code. And I
Yeah.
actually kind of don't like those. I like writing SQL because SQL is super powerful,
Yeah.
and it is worth it for everyone here to learn a little SQL.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
so too.
the
Just the
different
basics.
databases have different advantages, so it's worth broad having a broad basis. But yeah, for what we do, databases cover us and give us a huge competitive advantage. You know, the
Oh,
fact that we understand databases, you know, in a system that produces data, which is what our systems tend to do. It never fails to surprise me that people don't then do the next step and do data handling. You know, so I built a system that produces data. Now I don't know how to handle or store that data. Well, you just think, now come on, there's a thing for that. Learn that thing. Um,
Stefan, do you
but
have a thought brewing there? Am I reading you that you have a thought brewing there?
yeah, but databases, LabVIEW, that was my presentation at GDefCon NA, like SQLite, JSON data
Yep.
structures, combining all that stuff. And
The way technique.
that's got started from one of Steve's blog posts a long time ago.
Uh, JSON
Now,
and
what would be
SQLite.
awesome is if Stephen Loftus Mercer could participate. My guess is he doesn't have the time, and there's probably something in his contract that prohibits it. But man, that'd be great if Stephen could participate. Has Stephen participated in the past before he left NI and went to SpaceX? Does anybody know?
In the advent of code, I don't know. I
Okay,
don't remember seeing his
No,
name there, but
no.
I gotta ping him anyhow, so I'll
it
ask
would
him
be
about that.
surprising not to see him because I imagine he would be near the top of the leaderboard, but
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
not. I mean, depend. A lot of the leaderboard stuff really just depends on like the time zones you're in. Because like if it happens during the middle of your workday and you can't take off work till you get home from work and half the people solved it already, that just
oh,
I'm
but
on I'm on the
would
East Coast
his
now,
his
so
solution would be C++, though, wouldn't it? I mean, I
Oh,
know
LabVIEW.
he created LabVIEW, but I thought C++ was
Oh,
his superpower.
I think LabVIEW is his other superpower because he's got at least three of them.
Oh
Um,
God, yeah. Writing science
yeah,
fiction.
way too many superpowers.
Yes.
But I did want to bring up, and it was something, Stefan, that you mentioned as well, because the other thing in the news, which I'm super excited about, and I've watched the videos, I cannot wait to get my hands on little Jakey boy, Jake AI, the most brilliant name ever for an AI bot. That Jake AI is coming out with Jake AI. And and it's interesting because I would recommend people go back, definitely go watch the most recent episode because Jim gets into a little bit of the design and the challenges of inference models and the power behind being able to do the inference and depending on the question. So super excited. I signed up. So this drops. I don't know what time it drops, but they're making Jake AI available tomorrow on Halloween. It's not going to write code yet. Jim is trying to figure out how to have, the freemium model so you can at least do some things with Jake AI for free. And it was fun to watch the dynamic between Jim and Steve because when it starts to generate things and code in the future, they want it to present, okay, here's what I might do with your code. And so there's almost a little bit of interaction there where you kind of direct it. It's not like the experience that we have right now with, GPT 4.0, I refer to as my bestie because it does all my research for me, or, 0.1, either one, 0.1 preview. So I'm excited to see where it goes. And so I just encourage people to dive in if it's something you're interested in. I think it's going to be out of the box. I think it's going to be great for learning. So you can ask questions and it will give you some good answers and you can give it thumbs up, thumbs down and help contribute, to the model itself. And then the other piece is, I think, on analyzing code, because you're going to be able to go have it, look at your code and make recommendations on, is my code good or bad? Well, it's okay, but you don't have any documentation here, blah, blah, blah. So I'm super excited. I'm willing to bet that on this group of individuals here. And I'm going to try to get Jake to help me with admin of code. We'll see if Jake's remotely useful or not on that, but I will test it out there just to get ideas. I'm willing to bet somebody out of this group is not super excited maybe about AI writing code, or is maybe a little bit skeptic, or maybe everybody here is kind of excited. What are your thoughts on that?
I have.
Sam, go.
So I used to be a huge AI skeptic. I have started using ChatGPT a bit in places where I would go to Stack Overflow. I now type it into ChatGPT, and uh, it's probably about the same quality of answer, which because it probably scraped all that stuff anyway. I very much like what you said about having the human in the loop because I think one of the challenges, and somebody was talking about this, they're using AI in the healthcare space to like, dictate stuff. It hallucinates, it does this crazy stuff. So I don't think like turning the whole thing over to AI is the answer. But if you give it to AI and you say, hey, give me three things that I could do to make this code better, and it gives you three choices and it doesn't write the code for you, but it tells you what to do. That's useful because there's still a human in the loop. So like HIL, with hardware loop, I think AI needs to be HIL human in the loop. As long as the human's in the loop and still making decisions, I'm totally cool. Like in the healthcare thing, right? Like I would be totally cool with a doctor who like uh you know examined a patient, went through the list of things that they thought of. It wasn't one of those things. I don't know what it is. Asked ChatGPT not to do the diagnosis, but to say, what are the possible things this could be? Oh, I've missed that one. Let me go check that one. And the human's still doing the work. You're just kind of using it as like a reference. I think that's good. Handing it off to the
Yeah.
ChatGPT and saying, you diagnose this person, I think that's dangerous.
But it's
I
like
think in code too, like saying ChatGPT, write this code for me, that's dangerous. ChatGPT, give me some ideas for where to start. Totally cool. And I
it's
think
the
very,
same as with
very much aligned. Yeah.
advent of code. You wanna My solution is not the one and only truth, and you wanna get other inputs, and that's what ChatGPT can give you, or you can look with other people. Only ChatGPT can do probably a lot faster and a more different options. But yeah, looking at other solutions. That's where I think the strength comes from. Suddenly you get an idea that you didn't think of yourself, and you won't think of it if you don't ask anybody or anything for input.
That's a good point.
I mean,
And it's kind of a safe space to go ask a dumb question too.
my view is it's a very energy intensive way to do something less
Oh,
well than a simple Google search or a YouTube search or anything else. I I did think of a use case. This is why you saw me screwing up my head, because I thought of a very good use case where
And
it would
before you
play
go
to
off
its
on your
strength.
use case, mention a little bit. Can you elaborate just a tad on the energy use piece? Because I think that's interesting. I think people would want to hear what you're thinking there.
Well, currently it's free, and that's because they're not
Passing the trace.
taking into account the cost of the trainings, which they're essentially
Certain ones are
building.
free and certain ones you pay $20 a month for. I'm
Yeah,
paying $20 a month for
you're
4.0.
not paying the energy cost compared to a
No.
Google search, and the energy cost can be expensive. It can be equivalent. It depends. The type of thing that I've seen demonstrated on the LabVIEW world is give me a 15 page description of what a while loop is. Well, that's not that useful, really. I'm not going to get any use from that in the LabVIEW world. So yes, that's very clever, and the English language is fine, and it all looks okay, but it isn't useful. So for my energy cost, I'm not getting use back. But
There's
I
another
did
thing on
think,
the energy cost. I'm going to interrupt you here because I read an article just this morning on concerns on water consumption, at least in the US,
yeah,
because the amount of water it takes to cool a data center, and somebody's going to get wicked rich when they figure out how to harness the heat from the data center and put that back in the grid. That would be nice if someone comes up with
well,
that one. But
and
anyhow,
a
yeah,
lot
there's
of
water and everything. Yeah.
the use is, I want a picture of Garfield holding a Kalashnikov with a jelly on his head. Well, if you had to pay for that, you wouldn't do it. So the moment they attach cost to AI, people aren't going to do it, or a lot, the equivalent cost. I'm
But I
not
pay
saying the
for it.
$20. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but
But also,
that's
I would
$20. That's not
pay
paying for it.
your twenty
I would
dollars.
pay up to 100 a month. I would pay up to 100 a month when I am learning something new. So like I was learning Python not too long ago
Yeah, but
and I got
the
so much
marketing the
information.
marketing Silicon Bros, they want to invest trillions and trillions of pounds into this. Sam Altman wants fusion reactors all set up to do. Well, that's a cost. This is those trillions, all that investment, all that money, all those hundreds of millions, at some or billions. Some point, somebody's going to want some of that back. It's not free. That money is not going into this so that Microsoft will one day go, all those servers we put, we'll just write that off. We will that cost at some point has got to be paid for.
Right.
And at
We're gonna
the moment it gets paid for, a lot of the value comes out of the proposition because it's not giving me something back yet. But I did think of, frustratingly, I did think of
yeah.
actually a really good use case, and it was within LabVIEW, and it was to do with if you saw Weber's presentation at GDevCon when he's doing searches through LabVIEW, through
the
all the
graphical
nodes using graph,
searches.
yeah, and there was stuff to do with that which sort of clicked in my mind that you could be where I'm searching around now for something. I could be putting that in a language and find me the node that does this, and it goes and finds me a point in my hierarchy where these things happen. So show me a point where the dumb example currently would be the where show me all the breakpoints, and you go for it. It shows you all of those. But say that's something a bit more specific, show me.
Yeah, like
Well,
Weebus
show
thing
me
is show me
circular. Yeah. I'm sorry,
everywhere
Stefan.
you add a constant one
Yeah,
with a plus.
yeah. And so
So
where you were actually putting a definition into that to get that search working, that's what AI should be doing. This is what the chat part of
But let's
ChatGPT's
do it.
would be really good at, I think.
Well, and I think we're going to see some of that. I'm going to close this out and move us on the JKI. But I will say one thing. I'm going to close this out, but I'm going to say one more thing. So, one of the things that Jim was talking about was just going through your project. What are some things we would want it to do? Go find all my orphan VIs. Go find
Yes.
all of my circular references, things like that.
Yeah.
And
Brilliant.
that's on the front end, definitely, of what they want to do. So here's the interesting part. So we saw AI at NI Connect, and I'm not in the loop on, I don't have like the preview of NI's AI stuff. I signed up for it, but I haven't gotten it yet. And so I'm looking at Jim's got this out, and I'm looking at what we saw at NI Connect was a lot of stuff around test requirements and turning requirements, identifying requirements, turning those into test steps. So I'm thinking like I don't know what kind of handshake's going on here between JKI and NI, but I'm like, NI could focus on the test side of things with regards to AI, support Jim and JKI. So then you got Jake from JKI. Then NI, under test requirements, they come up with requirements, Rachel, Rachel AI, and then Rachel AI and Jake AI, they get married and have AI kid bots that do even more stuff for us. So anyhow, that's just my thought of where they can go.
I think for a rules-based thing like the test definition, you don't need AI. It's a rules-based definition thing. I've written a parser that
Yeah.
will
Mhm.
generate code from a test spec. A test spec has rules if your company has any
Yep.
rules. So
Mhm.
so what you're doing is you're throwing a tool at something that hasn't got a good process in the hopes of making something that is
Bingo.
untrustworthy in my
Yep.
mind. So
Interesting.
I still think they're searching for an application for it because the city wants, or New York wants AI somewhere in NI's portfolio or Emerson's portfolio. So I'm not entirely sure that's it, but I think some of the navigation search problems in the LabVIEW project, I think there's stuff in there that could be really quite useful.
Yeah.
That's probably where I would see it working.
So, quick time check. Is everybody good to go to the half hour mark?
Yeah. All
Okay,
right.
excellent. I'm good too. So we got another 22 minutes or so, a couple of other things we do want to talk about. And if we end up circling back to AI or circling back to Advent of Code, that is fine too. But I want to make sure we had time to talk about there was a UK partner meeting. And so maybe Steve, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Then, because there's definitely the challenge that you guys have found with academia, and it sounds like NI is addressing that. I don't know exactly how they're
But
doing it, but why don't you opine a little
there,
bit
there,
on the meeting?
there was quite a so from a partner perspective. So SSDC are an alliance partner or partner, as we're called now. We're not alliance partners, and we have been for 20 years plus. And NI 5 years ago pretty much withdrew from the UK market. So they withdrew the office, they withdrew meetings. So any alliance partner or partner meetings were in Europe, which is a considerable expense to go to a meeting, go to somewhere behind a meeting. And it was all, I thought at that time, my company was fairly independent of NI. So, we've got customers and we're fine. But it's had an impact. And that was probably my first point, which is not really specifically this meeting. But it occurred to me that them being absent had an impact on our market. So when they had this meeting in London, which was great, and they probably over 11 NI people were there. So a considerable investment and some higher ups, and there was VPs and all sorts. I don't know how high that up isn't in the NI organization, but VPs, all right, no. And it was very honest. There was numbers talked about, and normally these things they don't give you numbers and percentages and things like that. But it was honest, and they said they neglected this market, and this is a new era that we're trying to bring back. The thing we had, the way, but better, and it was quite good. I came away feeling quite optimistic about it, and in those conversations were reinvigorating the academic stuff. So again, they completely absent. They've removed themselves from academia, which is I mean, it's as baffling as moving themselves from one of the bigger markets. Is a baffling decision which only people in large corporations seem to be able to make. Um, and it's
It was baffling, and I
self-destructive.
was on the inside, and it was baffling. The
Yeah.
whole thing was,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And it's been destructive to the LabVIEW platform. It's
Mhm.
been destructive to alliance partners or partners because we can't, and customers and companies who want to employ people who know LabVIEW. I mean, from my perspective, that's great because I just can keep increasing my hourly rate. But from a proliferation of LabVIEW, it's not so good. I want this language I love to be used everywhere. Really, that's probably one of my bigger things. And some of it's not completely altruistic. I think if it's used everywhere, then there's more business for me. So it's
Yeah.
it's a win-win. But so there were several things that came out of that. Really, for me, it was the dawning that my company's not quite as independent of NI as I thought it was. And we've had okay years, not brilliant, but certainly the UK LabVIEW consultant industry has suffered through their absence.
What's interesting as well, and I kind of alluded to this when I reshared a post because they were hiring, I think it was Alan Solomon posted on LinkedIn that they were hiring graduate students to come into whatever engineering program they
Yeah.
have. And this is what I really kind of embraced and appreciated being at GDevCon in Stuttgart. It's just that reminder that, well, all of my NI peers or some of my favorite NI peers are still there. They're just working at a distributor or working at a partner but still within this ecosystem. And so that ecosystem, I think, is really strong. And I am thankful for Emerson that Emerson turned this boat around because it was post Emerson when this boat got turned around.
Oh yeah.
And I'm impressed with how fast the boat was turned around. And so I do want to also kind of bring up as a consultant and as a partner, you're running a business and you love LabVIEW, but you're also running a business and you need to be profitable. And for those of us that are engineers and didn't go to business school, and we can solve some very, very tricky problems that get us on the top of the advent of code board, but we might not know how to do billing or hire people. And so I want to kind of shift a little bit to the LabVIEW Consultant Summit. And I want to hear it from you, Sam, because I feel like the experiment that we had when we did the LabVIEW Consultants Summit, which is an online summit, and I'll let Sam explain what it's about in the end conference piece of it. But we focused the conversation on the business topics as opposed to software topics. And it was really geared toward partners and consultants and even larger system integrators. And it was a fantastic forum for having conversations you normally don't get to have and having conversations just around business. And so at this last one that was held in October, I'm in the room hearing from Taylor and her role as, quote, a virtual assistant, although she's a real human, she's not a bot, and hearing what she's able to provide for people. And that was a very important connection, even though I know Taylor, to hear her in that room and have that unique conversation as part of the LabVIEW Consultant Summit. So on that note, Sam, you got this going because you are the architect of adventure. That name means something. And you took us down this unconference adventure twice now. So I want to kind of hear your thoughts on how things are going and where you see these types of events in the future.
Yeah. So I had some conversations about this morning, actually. So, I got onto the on-conference thing. I went to, I think, the Software Crafters Conference or a couple of these online conferences that were this on-conference format. And basically, the idea is, you go to a normal conference, you sit there and you're a consumer. You sit there and you listen to what the other people are talking about. And also, the process for some of these conferences, people put in talks like 6 months ago, right? And so it's all dated and stuff, and you're trying to get whatever the person has to say. But it's a one-way street. And so the on-conference idea is basically we've got a bunch of open rooms and you bring whatever you want to talk about. And you can decide on the spot. So you can see a presentation or you go into a room and you have a conversation about one thing and it sparks an idea and you're like, hey, I want to talk about this other thing now. And you can at that point in time go open a room. So it's much more spontaneous, it's much more in the moment, and it's much more participatory because it's more conversational. It's more, I've got this. Instead of I'm presenting you myself as the expert, I'm giving you information. I'm presenting myself as like, hey, I've got this problem. I don't know anything about it. Can somebody help me? Kind of thing. And I think for business owners, it's huge because, we don't talk like you go to the normal LabVIEW conferences, very few people are talking anything about business. It's all about being more technical and technically better. And, every time somebody wants to start their own business, I tell them, I'm like, yes, technical skills are important, but you only have to be so good. You just have to get the problem solved. Like the real challenge for most of us is not the problem solving part. It's how do you sell it? And to your point, I think as engineers, like the biggest thing we can do is we have problem solving skills. So if you view like selling yourself as a problem, engineering problem to be solved, it makes it a lot easier. Now, part of the problem is though, usually our engineering problems that we solve don't involve people, right? They involve like physics, which has like hard equations and things, and people are unpredictable and there's no equation for a person that you can put in your model and like run the numbers and, oh, this is what works, this is what doesn't. So uh, you kind of have to almost embrace that scientific side of like experimentation. So like marketing is a great thing for experimentation, right? Like marketers always do A/B testing. So you throw out two sales pitches and you give them to a bunch of people, and whichever one hits more, and you try to replicate that, and then you replace the other one and see if you can find something that does better. And you're constantly keeping doing that. But if you approach it from like the engineer scientist brain as this is a problem to be solved, I think it works. But yeah, yeah, I
I
don't
Yeah,
know.
I
I
I
Oh,
like it as an event. I think I gave the last one. I gave one of the sort of ad hoc sessions, which I was quite happy with, which was about happiness. So
no
it doesn't have to be about everything. I mean, I had two problems with this one this year. One it was too close to GDevCon, so I was on the I've just stopped doing voluntary stuff. Now I need to work phase. So that was quite hard for me to find the time to attend, which is a shame. I reckon if it was in December, it would be a lot easier to do. I know it's probably then a pain to organise,
The
but
good thing is there are more events. The bad thing is they're closer to each other.
yeah, and that's always the issue, isn't it? But I mean, this one has a lot of value again if you're a consultant, but also I think just normal programmers in a company would benefit from thinking like a consultant and treating their stakeholders as customers and having that point of view in life because there's a lot of stuff that you should be doing and you don't do. So selling yourself, well, you should be selling yourself to your manager to get a better wage. You should be getting better work, getting better conditions. That's a sales thing. Project management, process management, all of those things make you better at what you do, and you should be pushing that, not receiving that from your quality department. And so there's a lot of sort of things that
you
would
bring it,
are better
yeah.
generally beneficial.
So I like that. Sam, I was going to ask the question about, do we want to do an unconference that's more technical? But based on Steve, what you said, maybe we run the unconference. We do another one in December. Is December coming up quick? It might be maybe January.
You don't have
And
time because you're doing Advent of Code time.
oh, that's right. Thank you. No time. No conferences in December now. All right. So January or February, because we'll have to plan and do, Steve, exactly what you're saying, where it's still the LiveView Consultant Summit. And when we're marketing, we also market to young engineers or team leads. Because if you think about your group within a large company, that group still might have a P&L. It might be run exactly like a company is run, and you've got to have the same skill sets there. And I also think, and then I'll pause, I also think about Chris Cellino's presentation that he's given a couple variations of is everything a software engineer needs to know to be successful outside of engineering.
Yeah.
So I think there's an angle here for
Well, if you understand profit and loss personally, you'll understand why a
yeah.
company is doing certain things to you, so actually that is actually a useful thing to know. There's a lot of, I think as I've got older, there's a lot of skills that aren't pushing a mouse around a desk and clicking on things.
Especially if you have quick drop, you don't need to do that anymore.
I can't remember.
All right. What I am going to do is keep a little bit of an eye on time. I was originally going to broadcast from a boat today, but I am going to go out on the boat soon. I am broadcasting from, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm actually in Louisville. Louisville is right sandwiched between Friendsville and Maryville, south of Knoxville, and 3 hours from Nashville, and not too far from Centerville. So now you know how everything's named here in Tennessee. We also want to do and if there's anything else, I don't want to cut anybody off on the consultant. Any other comments on this before we go do a shout out, much deserved shout out for Mr. Kevin Shirey?
Mm.
All right. Kevin Shirey is awesome. And Kevin, you get the videos out. I don't care if the video doesn't come out tomorrow. It might take 6 months for the video to come out. When the video comes out, it's amazing. And you are putting so much personal time into crafting these amazing videos from NI Connect, from GDevCon. And so I want all of us to have an opportunity here to like shout out at the amazingness, Kevin, that you have done. We want to, as part of TMiLV, we want to recognize either amazing projects that people have done in LabVIEW. In this case, our amazing project winner, Kevin, is you for all the hard work, because this is volunteer work. And when you're doing this, you can't do admin of code, you can't really do summer of code, and you can't earn as much income as you might normally do. So we wanna thank you for that.
Yeah,
Sam,
as
Steve, words.
well, as somebody who puts a great deal of effort into editing these videos, I know the pain, Kevin. No, don't. No,
Yeah, how much editing have you done so far on this one? Yeah,
I did on my
Kevin.
on my on my Rasda video, the last one. I did quite a lot of editing, but but the the thing is Kevin's an absolute star, and we should appreciate him. We should,
Yeah.
all the volunteers, to be quite honest, you are worthy. Anyone who does something just for the love of it is in our communities. We should be hold up in awe, especially if they got a full-time job.
And there's a lot of people in the community that are doing just that, and it's awesome.
Yeah, and the thing is with volunteers is life sometimes gets in the way, but that's good. It's not a bad thing. Life should get in the way. It's that you should be spending time with family and stuff, and that's I think it's all good. I think we should just appreciate everything that Kevin does, and he does a wonderful job, really wonderful job, and every great video he puts out is something that somebody can put on their CV. It's something they can show off. It's a thing of value. He's giving somebody a thing of value. So I think it's, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Sam, Stefan,
Basically
comments?
exactly what Steve said. Steve took all the words I was going to say. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great job he does, and he once showed me the difference between a pre-processed and a post-processed video, and there's a lot of work that goes in there to get it good quality on the internet. Yeah, well done, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. In our closing 5 to 10 minutes here, one of the things, Steve, that you mentioned when we were talking in the green room as we're rolling into our D block here is that some of our listeners may not know exactly what we're talking about. And so it's like, okay, we're talking about Fabiola. Let's make sure we know everybody understands who is Fabiola. Go look her up. Or we're talking about actor framework, and someone's like, well, what is actor framework? And so what we want to do is make sure that we can be a little bit more introductory at least with some of the things that we're talking about. So when someone is new to LabVIEW, onboarding into the community, you guys who are newer, you're going to have some takeaways here. And I think Advent of Code is definitely going to be a big one for someone who is newer. But so Stefan, you and Steve were talking about CTI, and Stefan, you were talking a little bit about what your son is working on. So why don't we share, you guys just riff on that, on Stefan, what your son's working on in the CTI.
Well, thing is, my son is almost 16 and he wanted to start learning programming to make his life a little bit easier. And then he thought like, yeah, I'll ask ChatGPT to teach me Python. And it was very hard. English is not our native language. And I was thinking like, maybe you should try LabVIEW because then I can help you a bit better. And here's the CTI. And he was like, wow, this is what I really understand. He was in art school. He likes drawings. He likes science. So it all makes sense to him. Seeing a program instead of reading it. But that didn't really change how LabVIEW stands out to the other languages. So it made me think the leverage of CTI here is it lowers the introductional barrier for people or students, especially at his age. He can get started right away. There's a small example tutorial that's very well done, and they understand the concept. They get started, and then his mind shifted from, oh, now I don't do the automation scripting for on my computer, but I can do hardware stuff. I can steer my LED strips or whatever. I can read a sensor value. He was really enthusiastic, and I want to thank Steve and Derek for this.
I don't think I could be happier. That makes me so happy. And I think it spurs me on to carry on working sort of next year. I have plans. I really need to push very hard the only thing you should be doing is looking at a scroll bar, and that's how you install a complete system from start to scratch with all the hardware drivers, with everything ready to go. One scroll bar. That's what I reckon. It should be one scroll bar, maybe a registration, and that's it. And that's the aiming point, I think. And that's hardware and virtual machines. I think when I get to that phase, and we're moving at pace now, the team is big, so it's. I think we'll get there quite quick. So I'm less focused on the materials now. I will tell my daughter who wrote the introductory stuff for the CTI, so she'll appreciate that. Not that she likes praise; she's British. So
well, that's the oldest one. He's almost 16. The youngest one is 8, so he's too young to understand the English and the LabVIEW stuff. But he started with Scratch as a programming language. Yeah, and then went into the Lego. What's it called?
Mindstorms. Yeah.
Mindstorms. Yeah, the Lego Mindstorms. Yeah, and it's also appealing to him. So here in Belgium, we have coding dojos like the judo stuff, and then volunteers teach kids how to program, and that's also where CTI would fit in perfectly because they have little hardware pieces and kids like to play around with it.
Yeah, I'm very keen to get on with my little Raspberry board. I think once that's done and you can just load, you can build a board and load an image, and that's got everything on it. I reckon that's going to be the next sort of stage, and this will bring in all the hobbyists as well. You say, look, for the price of a Raspberry Pi 5, you've got everything you need.
So, Steve, are you talking to Carla Grew from Academic at NI?
I have done, yes.
Okay, that's right. You had met with her. Okay.
Yes, I've met. Yes, she's good. I like Carla.
Yeah, me too.
She's straightforward, and Eli and Norm are very on board as well. The
Excellent.
question I think is that I think they feel that we can do this ourselves, and if they bring corporate NI in, maybe that'll slow it down. And
So you're thinking, Eli, you're thinking NI's thinking that the community can go faster, so
yeah,
empower the community. And I think you're right. And this is where I'm really curious, and maybe we eventually have Eli on at some point, what he specifically, the teaser he sent out. So going back to the beginning of this particular broadcast, and just kind of to set expectations, we're going to close out here in the next couple minutes. So if anybody has kind of final thoughts, be thinking about your final thoughts. But it'll be good to see what the new engagement models for academic actually are. And I expect that's aligned with what the conversations that you're having of the community clearly is going very, very quickly at this. How do we empower the community? I look forward to hearing what that's going to be.
yeah. Me and Sam did have a little bit of a discussion about other introductory content, and I wonder whether we could insert into the podcast, certainly the video side of it, an introduction, a little video that says that shows people LabVIEW being used in a certain way, or shows a code snippet and explains it, or something like that. Maybe we start introducing things like that. But the only reason I'm raising it now is because obviously we have to prepare it as a video to
Well,
put
there you
in.
go. We got the Advent of Code is kicking off in very shortly. And so I think we could probably use Advent of Code to be a good kind of onboard ramp to show a little code and show the decisions behind the design for it.
If I can encourage people to press record on their screens for me and send me videos, that would be really cool.
Ooh, okay. There we go. And then you're
Sorry.
gonna have to edit. And then you're gonna go through Kevin's pain when you edit all the videos that we send you.
I can do
So
that. It's not too bad.
So Sam, final thoughts, Sam?
I'm good. I thought it was
Test-driven design is my big takeaway from what you said. Test-driven design and applying that to Advent of Code. Those are my big takeaways. Stefan?
it's a great opportunity.
Yep. Final thoughts, Stefan?
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and I hope to see you on the Advent of Code.
Yeah, I will see you there. Thank you. Thank you for diving in. And I really appreciate you inserting kind of towards the end of the conversation there. Here's all the different ways that this can be used, whether it's used in hiring questions or used in academia. I'm super excited. Mr. Watts, do you have anything final to say? There's always something for you to say, and there's never a final
maybe
from...
next month we have all our try and invite all our guests on for the Christmas one.
Okay, but we're still October.
This is going out in November then, so the next one will be
That's
of
true.
December-ish, won't
November. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Kind of
We'll have
December-ish.
all of our elves and we'll have elf hats on, and we'll be in the middle of Advent of Code. I think that would be awesome. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for this October-November edition of This Month in LabVIEW. And thank you to our amazing conspirators, Professor of Pragmatism, Steve Watts, the architect of adventure. It is always an adventure with Sam, Sam Taggart, and Stefan Lemmens. Thank you so much. You are a stalwart in the community. We look forward to going back and looking at the sessions you've given before on databases and on shortcuts. Shortcut, Stefan. And thank you for introducing us to the Advent of Code. Hopefully our numbers triple in the LabVIEW community for Advent of Code of 2024. And I think the G Central people may be able to get out the little badges for those of us that participate. We have to figure out how to do all that, but we'll make that happen. Thank you all. I am Nancy Henson. I am our Chief of Connected Conversations. We'll see you next month.